What up, y'all? Welcome to another episode of The Growth Blueprint. In this episode, we're going to be talking about a mindset shift, but it's a mindset shift that comes from science and from my background that we use oftentimes in our coaching, and I've used it throughout my life and try to teach other people about it for the sake that I think that it's really useful. And it's coming from my science background. And so to tell you a little bit about my science background, I worked in labs for multiple years in college, in biology labs doing experiments on pond water, in chemistry labs doing experiments synthesizing nylon, making solvents, all of this stuff, practicing science, doing science experiments, analyzing data, collecting data, drawing conclusions, writing reports on this data, asking questions about what would happen if we made changes to the process that we used. And the entirety of this entire process, we were probing the intimate relationship between cause and effect of different various relationships between things. That's what science is. Science is establishing the relationship of cause and effect between one or more things. And I spent years and years doing this and learning how that process works across a vast array of different things, from biology to chemistry to my own personal health and fitness. And I learned an awful lot about how to do science and how to utilize the ideas of cause and effect. So in the scientific realm, we utilize cause and effect all the time. And you're probably familiar with this. You know, you select something and you say, okay, you form a hypothesis. Okay, and so there's this thing called the scientific method. And the scientific method is where you form a hypothesis and you say, okay, I think that if I do X thing to Y, then this is going to be the outcome. And then you test that hypothesis and you start to elucidate and discover the nature of the cause and effect relationship between these two objects. This is fundamentally what a science experiment is. This is what I spent, years of my life doing, is probing the nature of cause and effect and the relationship of cause and effect between different variables. And then you would look at the data, collect the data, interpret the data, draw conclusions on what it is that we've learned about the relationship between one or more things and this nature of cause and effect. And so you can apply this to your health and fitness. And so let's first come up with a simple cause and effect relationship to test and see exactly what that would look like. Let's use something pretty common that maybe all of you have experienced. So if you've ever cleaned dishes with dish soap, I'm sure you have noticed that when the dish soap hits fat, it causes the fat to run away to the sides, okay? You may have seen this experiment done with milk and food coloring, where you put a couple dots of food coloring in a bowl of milk, and then you drop some dish soap or take dish soap on a toothpick and put it in, and it rushes. There's this rush of color, and this color spreads out to the edges of the dish. Okay, so this would be a simple experiment that you could do. You could say, okay, well, are there different kinds of soap? What happens when I use different kinds of soap in this experiment? I'm going to form the hypothesis that maybe only dish soap is the soap that causes this phenomena of the color spreading out across the dish. Okay, well, to test this, we're gonna get a bunch of different dish soaps, maybe some different hand soaps, maybe some body wash for the shower. You gather up a bunch of different soaps and you would test them, and you would look at what each soap did under the same process, the same procedure, and then you would collect the data, and then you could draw conclusions about something. And you could say, okay, well, was it only dish soap, or did all of these soaps do the same thing? And you can start to understand more about the cause and effect relationship here between what's causing the effect to happen, right? Is there something specific about dish soap? Maybe it's all soaps in general. And so that's a really simple example. And so we can do the same thing with our health and fitness. And so I'm gonna paint a picture here. And so we're gonna pick some things to compare. Okay, and I wrote this down. This is what I'm looking down because I have some notes here, so I do this right. But let's pick a current cause and effect relationship in a lot of people's lives. Okay, the first is we're not happy with our weight. We don't feel great. Our hormones might be messed up. You wish you had more energy. You struggle to get good sleep. Your confidence, your happiness, the measurable and unmeasurable aspects of what it feels like to be you. Okay, so this is the subjective nature of what it is to be you, the experience of being you. Your life as you experience it. Your body, your mind, your spirit, your energy, your relationships, these things that don't necessarily have a measurement, but are nonetheless still very real. Okay? The second is going to be sleep, nutrition, physical activity, relationships, things that can and oftentimes are measured on a regular basis, things that are supposed to make life better. Okay, so now we have these two things. And so we can say, well, which of these is the cause and which of these is the effect? Right? A common hypothesis that many people may form, whether they know they're forming a hypothesis or not, is if I felt better, I would be able to work out more. I would have more energy to cook more. If I had more energy, I could show up in the lives of my children better. And so we can form a hypothesis that says, okay, if some of these subjective things about what it's like to be me were better, then I could do some of these standalone sleep, nutrition, physical activity things more effectively. Okay, this is a very common hypothesis that many people have. And so I'm also going to walk us through some other kind of hypotheses that people have. And so, oftentimes it can be very difficult to consistently keep up with cooking meals at home for you and your family that are healthy and homemade. And if you had more energy, it sure would be a lot easier to do that. It can be really hard to squeeze in the time to move for the sake of moving, not to try and get somewhere or get things done or just because you're busy, but actually just move intentionally for the sake of moving, right? Maybe if we had lost a little bit more weight, maybe if our back or our knees didn't hurt so much, maybe if we had more energy, if we slept better, right? It would be a little easier to get those workouts in, right? Sometimes it's a lot easier to just chill on the couch and unwind in the evenings by watching some TV or scrolling while you wait to fall asleep, right? Maybe we need to unwind, to decompress from the day's activities, right? It can be frustrating as heck to try and work hard at feeling better, looking better, taking care of your health and your body for you and your family when your hormones are messed up, or you've got things working against you, stuff that you feel helpless to change, right? These are very common hypotheses and thoughts and feelings that people have. And whether you realize that you're actually forming a hypothesis or not, you're saying, okay, right, this cause is leading to this effect, and this is the way that things are. And so this is a view of a cause and effect relationship between the two. And so to get scientific again, right, we can have these categories broadly defined as the things we do, right? This is the nutrition, the exercise, the sleep, right? We have the things that we do, and then we have the way that we feel, exist, and are, right? Those are things like our hormones, our energy levels, our muscle, our body fat, our mood, right? The way that we feel, exist, and are is one category. And then the things that we do is the other category. And so in a scientific experiment, such as examining the cause and effect relationship of these two things, from a scientific perspective, right, it would not be uncommon to invert the cause and effect relationship, test it, and see what we can learn, okay? And so what I have found in the time that I have been coaching looking at things through this lens of science and the scientific method and determining the nature of cause and effect is that most people look at the way that they are, exist, and feel as the cause, and the effect is on what they do. And so if they have hormone problems, right, struggle with sleep, struggle with body weight, struggle with self-confidence, struggle with energy levels, right, these things are the way that you are, and because these things are the way that you are, right, they lead to suboptimal levels of the stuff that you do. And as a consequence, you say, well, this is just the way that it is. And so you've collected lots of data about these things from your own personal life. But what I'm saying is, what if we switched these things and we looked at things a little bit differently? And so we could say, okay, what if we tested if we got 20% better at sleep? What would happen? If we got 20% better at sleep, what would happen if we did eat 25% better for 12 months in a row? What would happen? What kind of cause and effect relationship would we start to uncover, right? Maybe I would try measuring what 15% extra movement a day did for us, right? What would that do? And so what we can see is if we're able to flip the cause and effect relationship, we can start to test some things about the stuff that we do and see if there is an impact on the way that we feel. And you don't have to test loads of stuff or too much things or try to do 100% better in any of these areas. You can start out relatively small and say, okay, what if we just did do 20% better, 15% better over the course of time? Would changing the things that I'm doing, does that have a cause and effect relationship on the way that I feel? Or is it just a one-way street, right? And so part of where so many people get health and fitness so wrong is they never test this inverted relationship of cause and effect. They assume that because they feel a specific way and it prevents them from doing specific things, they think that this is a one-way causal relationship. And they never think to switch things around and test the alternative, okay? But in science, this isn't how we do things. In science, we're always trying to see what this nature of cause and effect is. And chances are, if we tried to make some improvements on the stuff that we did, we would see positive outcomes in the way that we feel. Now, intuitively, this makes sense. But far too often, our brains do not subconsciously understand or accept that this may actually be the case. And as a matter of fact, we see with most of our clients that there are significant improvements when we start to test things and track data and look at this data and interpret this data and draw conclusions and learn about your physiology and the cause and effect relationship between the things that we do and the way that we feel. And so this is part of the reason that cookie cutter approaches to health and fitness don't work well. They don't actually ask any questions. They don't attempt to explain any cause and effect relationships. And because they don't ask any questions or try to determine any cause and effect relationships, they're not very useful when it comes to applications in the real world, because the real world is where cause and effect reigns supreme, right? There's always cause and effect in the world that we live in. And so without asking questions, without forming hypotheses, without testing variables, without trying to establish and learn what the cause and effect relationships are with our health and fitness, with the way that we feel and the things that we do, we don't actually learn anything. And if we're not actually learning anything, how do we expect to be able to get different results? right? We're all familiar with the old saying about insanity, right? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Well, this is true. But in science, right, the scientific method with science experiments, we're taught to do something, collect data, look at what has changed, form a new hypothesis, ask a new question, try things a little bit differently, collect data, see what we learn, see what's improved, form another hypothesis, ask another question, test some new things out, collect data, interpret that data, form another hypothesis, make some more changes, ask another question. And this is fundamentally what we do in our program as we coach people, is we are continually trying to learn as much as we can about your physiology and how your physiology works, what your body likes, what your body doesn't like, right? What is going to help us, what's going to hurt us, so that we can learn together what works best for you. What's going to actually help you achieve the results that you want to achieve, right? Because everybody's different. Everybody is unique. Everybody has different circumstances. Everybody has different struggles that they've gone through. Everybody has different likes, different dislikes, different schedules, different habits, right? Different responsibilities. Each individual is very unique. And so unless you have a method designed to help you learn and start to understand the nuance of your situation, then you're going to be stuck in the dark with a blindfold on, swinging a bat at a ball that doesn't exist. But if we can learn to ask the right questions, to test the right hypotheses, to collect data, to interpret that data, and to learn, if we can learn, then we can grow. Because if we can learn, then we can start to do things differently. And if we can start to do things differently, we can start to get different results. And so if you're sick of getting the same results over and over and over and over again, right? Regardless of what you're trying, then it's time to do something different. It's time to invert, right? Invert the cause and effect relationship that you've been testing out and ask some different questions. Now, this is probably a lot. It's probably a little overwhelming to anyone that does not have a science background to understand this. But a simple place to start, okay? A simple place to start is, let's again look at the sleep example. I think it's fair to say that possibly the question that we can ask is, would we have better energy if we slept 10% longer every night? I don't know, but it's relatively easy to test and find out. And so this is what I'm talking about, is it's small things like this. What kind of question can I ask? What kind of test is simple enough to run to see the cause and effect relationship between the way I feel and what I'm doing, or between what I'm doing and the way that I feel? And as you go through this process, you start to learn and you start to grow and you start to do things differently and move towards the goals that you have. So that's what I got for you today. As always, your time is your most valuable resource. And so if you spent that with me here today, I hope that I made it worth your while, because time is precious. And I always want to make sure that you are getting the most for your time when you spend it with me. So I hope that I made an impact. If I did, please rate the show. That would mean so much to me. Share it with somebody that you think could benefit from hearing this. Listen to another episode. I've got tons of episodes out. I love doing this. I love what we do. If you don't follow me on social media, follow me on Instagram. It's at Thatchah, THATCHAH. I got a free newsletter where I put out these podcast episodes, a bunch of free resources. We actually have a walking fat loss study going on right now as well, and a masterclass coming up at the end of May. If any of that stuff interests you, make sure to check out the link in the description below where you can access all of those things. So, as always, I appreciate you. Stay amazing, work hard, share this with someone else, spread love, spread kindness, and I will see y'all in the next one.